Hey, hi. In this video, we will discuss about an example AWS tagging solution which can solve your problem. So here, as you know, in AWS, we don't have any universal API that can tag all AWS resources which are supporting the tags. What do I mean by this? In the sense, to tag the resources that you create in the AWS, you need to use native API belongs to that particular resource. For example, say if you're creating a EC2 service, you need to use EC2 tag APIs to tag that particular resource, right? So this is basically a challenge here that we don't have a universal method or universal API that can help us to tag the resources during creation. So in such cases, what I did is here I have built a solution with using AWS Lambda. So in this AWS Lambda, we will write a logic with using AWS Boto3 modules that can interact with the AWS Resource Explorer, which is basically a universal resource in AWS account. With using that, we can actually get the list of resources or basically list of ERNs where certain tags are not applied or certain tags are non-compliant, right? So once we get that data, which is basically a list of ARN where the resource tag is not happened, what we can do is we can elevate that data to tag the required tags on those resources or basically on those ARNs, right? So how does that happen is basically with using the AWS resource group tagging APIs, right? So here, if you look at this solution at a holistic now, so what I mean is basically, we can actually solve the problem of tagging capability on AWS with using this custom solution. That is, we will write a basically Lambda in Python, Python Boto3 module, so which can actually interact with the two services, that is AWS Resource Explorer and AWS resource group tagging API, and helps us to bridge the gap of the universal not availability of universal tagging solution, right? Okay, so here let me quickly walk you through the code, and then I'm going to show you that how does this solution works in real time. And also I will share you this script in the video description. You can find it from there and try to use it from your side. Okay, so before you start using this particular solution, what you have to do is there is a prerequisite that so you need to go to the your AWS account, search for AWS Resource Explorer, and click on that. You need to enable the AWS Resource Explorer in your account. Then only you can use the APIs of AWS Resource Explorer to actually search the resources according to your filter, which I'm going to explain you now. So basically, so this is my AWS Resource Explorer service in my account. I have already enabled. So in this, when you enable the resource search, right? So you're going to create a default view. So if I go to the default view here and click on this one and go to the the edit option here. So here what happens, when I created this view called all AWS resources, I have selected name, given the name like all hyphen resources, selected all the regions, like include all the resources and certain tags as well. So basically, so this is how default views should be created. So view is nothing but kind of a supporting feature in the AWS Resource Explorer, which can actually power the your resource search query, right? So without views, you cannot invoke the resource search API on AWS Resource Explorer. So this is the prerequisite which I have done, right? So now what I do is I'm going to take you to the my VS Code here. So this is my VS Code where I have written this code from scratch. Okay, so this is purely my brain, which I have tried to study these resources here. We are using AWS Resource Explorer, we are using AWS Resource Group tagging capability, we are using AWS SDK, that is Boto3 module here, and try to build a universal tagging solution which can actually bridge the gap of not availability of universal tagging API, right? So let me quickly walk you through this code, and then we're gonna go for the real-time demo as well. So here I have the two files. So one is the Resource Explorer file which you can execute locally. This is the file which is I have modified so that you can directly consume in AWS Lambda, right? So as you see here, so this is the piece of code which I'm going to quickly walk you through now. So here we are importing the Boto3 module because I'm using the AWS Python Boto3 module. So in this one, I have three functions. One is the get resource list. So if I go to the diagram, so this is nothing but we are actually querying the AWS Resource Explorer. We are actually hitting the API of AWS Resource Explorer, which actually gets the list of resources with using certain query, right? I note that unfortunately this resource API supports or basically returns only 1000 resources in one API invoke, right? But actually this is not a problem. I don't see this as a problem because you can schedule the Lambda, keep on querying your AWS account. Basically it will keep on querying the resources in a sequential manner, and finally I do see that it will actually complete the loop basically, right? So for example, say you have 2000 resources. So when you run for the first time with using a certain query, it will return the resources which qualifies that query. That is, first 1000 will be returned. The next 1000 will be returned in the second iteration, because first 1000 will be solved. In the sense, first 1000 resources will be solved by applying the tags. The second 1000 batch will be returned in the second iteration. Okay, so that's the reason. So even though it returns 1000 resources in one query, it's not a problem. The next function that I have written is basically group the resource by region, because there is a particular reason that why I need to group the resources by region. That is something I have written a custom logic here, which I'm going to tell you in a while. So basically, since we are using the AWS resource group APIs, so and in that one we are using the tag resource API. That tag resource API will use basically that is actually a region oriented API. So that's the reason I need to group the the resource ARNs in the region wise, and then try to invoke, which we're gonna then try to invoke the tagging APIs to tag the resources. The logic which we're gonna see now in a couple of minutes. And similarly, basically, once we have grouped it, we're gonna use that output and try to invoke the tag APIs of AWS resource group tagging APIs, and which will actually tags the resources. All right. So basically, at a high level, this is walkthrough. Let me quickly go by line here. So first one, if you see that whenever you invoke the AWS Lambda, so it will come here. So first, you will print the statement like this, and then it will actually invoke the function that is get resource lit. As I explained earlier now, so this is the function which will get you the list of resources, or basically list of ARNs where certain query criteria is meeting. So here we are using, if you see here, we are using the Boto3 client, creating a Resource Explorer -2 client here. And then this is the view ARN. Remember that you need to create a view, and that view has an ARN that you can get. This value you can get it from the ARN like this. Go to the views, click on this views, and there is an ARN. So this is basically a static value. That's the reason I have hard coded it. So this is the ARN of your AWS account. If you have multiple multi-account environment, maybe you can orchestrate this as well. The next one is query. So here AWS Resource Explorer works with a query, which I'm going to walk you through right away. So basically, if I go to the Boto3 page, so you can go to the Boto3 document and go to the Resource Explorer APIs, and then you can go to the clients here. So in the clients, if you go to this one, so there is a function called, or basically API called search. In this search, if you see here, basically so we are using the client.search and with this parameter, which we're gonna see now. Now when we talk about the API document, right? So when you click on this one, it will open to this particular here. So this is the document which can help you to build the search queries as per your need. So if you see here, so basically if you want to query the untagged resources, so you can build a query something like this, that is tag:none, which means that it will get all the resources which are actually not having any tags, and it will return top 1000 in an account from all the regions. So likewise, so you can build a query of tagged resources. So for example, earlier we saw untagged resources. Now if you do not of that, which means that tagged resources. So here not operations of the query is being done with a slight changes in this query. That is, if you put a hyphen in front of that and use tag:none, which means that it becomes converse of untagged resources. What is the converse of untagged resources? Which means resources that at least have some tags like that, right? So similarly in the missing tags, so you can also build. So we're going to work on this one. So here we will try to query the resource list, which is actually does not has a tag of particular key, right? So here we are using this one, that is tag.key: department. In the sense, if you are looking for a resource which has the tag key called department, so this is something you can try to build it. In the sense, it will retrieve the AWS resource ARN which is not having a tags with a key like department. Okay, so anyway, so this is, I'm not going to go in detail. So this is basically how I have constructed AWS Resource Explorer query to invoke the search APIs. Now let me go back here. So this is where, so here in this video, I'm focusing on a resources that does not has a tag key called lab, right? So that is what my query is, and then we are actually constructing a dynamic list here. And then if I go back to the API document here, let's go back to the Resource Explorer API document and go back to the previous page here. So something like here. Here you see that Resource Explorer actually supports two types of contents. One is client, other one is paginator. So paginator is something like, so for example, say if you are hitting the API and it returns only limited outputs while it is supposed to return more than that, in that case, you can use the paginator. Paginator is basically it retrieves the all possible pages of the response. Yeah. So that is what we are using here. If I go back to this one, so basically you are actually using the client. So client is nothing but what? So this is our Resource Explorer client, and then you are invoking the get paginator with the option search. This is our paginator now. From the paginator, you are actually invoking the paginate function. So this is basically a syntax which you can explore right away here. So basically, if I go to the paginator, so if you go to the paginator for search, so this is the syntaxes. You can go through this one. Now I did the same thing. So here it is actually using the query string and view ARN as a parameter. So when you run this particular API, so it will get the response. So the response contains basically, if I go to the response, so the response syntax is something like this. It contains count, resource, list, and the view ARN. So which can which is I'm using here and trying to build a list of IDs only, list of ARNs. Yeah, and then in that one we are actually returning the unique ARN list. Okay, so maybe sometime I was thinking maybe it is collecting the duplicate. Basically, it is not collecting the duplicate, but I'm still adding the getting the unique ARN names or list of ARNs by using this trick, right? So basically, this is function is basically what it happens is it is actually returning a list of ARNs. Basically belongs to a certain query categories. Yeah, so that is basically, so if you see here, we got a response that is, we got a list of resources. Now, once we got a resources, what we have to do is we need to group them by the regions. Okay, we in AWS we have huge list of regions available where you can create a resources. Now here the problem is once you get a list of ARNs belongs to a query or search query. Now on that the list basically you need to apply AWS resource group tagging APIs, and AWS resource group tagging APIs works basically in the context of region, in the sense the API tagging API under the resource group, it actually works in a region context. So in that case, what I have to do is I need to get the list of ARNs which is belongs to a particular region only. So for example, US East, so I need all the ARNs of the US East region in a list, and then I can use it for tagging. So that's the reason it's a bit tricky here, but we have figured out a way, that is group the resources by region. So basically I got the list of ARNs and that is being passed to another function that is basically grouping the resources based on the regions. And this is very simple code. Basically, if you see here, we are actually constructing a dictionary, and that dictionary we being created something like this. So we were actually iterating over the list of ARNs and validating if ARN contains something like colon. So if you are aware of the AWS ARN, so it contains a colon. We're actually splitting that ARN from colon, and we are getting the the value that is belongs to at the third index or basically fourth index, and that is actually a region value, right? So then what we are doing is we are actually creating a key of this dictionary with using this. So if you see here, we are creating a key called region, and the value is equal to basically basically a list. In the sense you actually got something like this. If I can show you here, that is, for example, say US East one, and the value will be something like this. So this is what it contains. This is what it happens. So like this, it will keep on going for all possible resources, all possible regions here. Okay, so I'm just gonna minimize it here. All right, so this is basically we got the regions. All right. Okay. So basically what we do is so now we have the resource group now, and we have the resource group as a dictionary, and we constructed the dictionary with the region key value. And the value is nothing but so basically in the list we are actually collecting the all ARNs, and finally we are returning that particular dictionary. Yeah, this is what it happens here. So I'm going to minimize this now. So basically what we got is here, so if you remember now, so we got the dictionary. So now we got the dictionary. A dictionary contains the region, and value contains the list of ARNs belongs to the respective region, and that is being passed to a final function. That is where actually the engineering is happening. In the sense, it is tagging the resources in a batch wise with using a resource group API for tagging. So if I go to this function, and let me quickly walk you through this as well. So this is very easy function as well. So it's not a big complex. So it looks like a complex, but it is not a complex. So we are actually creating a variable called not tagged list, because I want to know the ARN or resource list which is not being tagged. Why? Because in AWS we have more than 300 plus resources or services, but some of the services are still about to support, or a resource are about to support the tagging capability. So I need to know those resources which are not being tagged. So that is basically a need here. That's the reason I want to collect that in this function. So what we are doing is, here we got the dictionary, that is resource group dictionary. In that we are actually getting the items. Basically from the items, what we are doing is we are actually getting the region and resource list. What does that mean? In the sense, for each item it contains a region as a key, and the value is nothing but resource list belongs to that particular region. And that is where we are actually going in the if loop here. So here if you see, that's what the trick is been done, right? So now I got the region value here. So I'm using the Boto3 and creating a client of resource group tagging API, and belongs to a region that is being basically the key of the particular dictionary. And that is how I'm tracking. Basically this resource group can also contain a null. Why? Because some of the ARN like S3 ARN, it does not contains the region value. So in such cases the region is nothing but null here. So that is being checked by this region key here. Okay, and then this is where we are actually creating a tag resource client. And this is something quite basically a quick logic. That is, we got the the resource client. Now I need to use this client and try to tag it. Basically we are using a tag resource API, and that API has a limit. In the sense, it can tag in a batch wise of batch containing of 20. In the sense, it can take a list of ARNs of 20 in one shot belongs to one region. And that's the reason this is the basically the batch creator. So we got a resource list here. To that resource list I'm just batching into a 2020. So for each batch what basically, so we got this batches is nothing but, that is nothing but it's a list of list. So we are actually iterating the batches, then invoking the tag APIs under the tag resource client. This is the batch we are actually passing, which is nothing but list of ARN, and then tags. Okay, so here remember that this logic is to add the tags. Yeah, so that's the reason we are using the tags here, right? And finally this API actually gives a certain response, and that response carries a failed resource maps. As I said here, some resources does not support the tagging, so in such cases it will return the ARN which are not went through for tagging. So those ARN list will be collected by using this particular method, right? So likewise so this is if you go for the else options, the else option is basically it's actually looking for a global resources. So when I say global resources, now try to think that so in that case, where do I need to create a client? When you have a resource like S3 bucket, so you need to create a client in US East region. So that's the reason we are creating a resource in a US East region. And then this is the client of US East region will be used for tagging. That's the only difference here. And then we are collecting the not tagged list ARNs, and that will be returned here. Okay, so basically we are actually outputting the ARN list which is not tagged, and we are also counting the number of ARN which is not went through the tags in this iteration. Okay, now if I go back to the best one, so basically that is the logic we have written in the AWS Lambda, and that is being scheduled here. So you can schedule it once in a day or once in a periodically, and then that is where the magic happens. Basically this Lambda keeps running. It will keep querying the AWS Resource Explorer, which is basically cost free. AWS Lambda is very less costly resources. It's basically the cost optimized resource by indeed actually. And then we are actually using the AWS Resource Group API, which is basically negligible, the negligible in the cost actually, right? So in total, this is very cost effective tagging solution which you can try to build in your AWS account. Okay, so this is currently supports for a single account. You can actually elevate this function to support for multi account as well. we have walked through this particular, the Lambda function. So same can be found in the untag as well. So here I have written the logic for untag. So if you want to untag it, you can do the same thing in this code. Okay, basically that is a converse of that. Okay, so here we are actually playing with the capability of AWS, the Resource Explorer and the AWS Resource Group API tagging. All right. So now what I do is, we're going to run this code in the AWS Lambda and try to see that whether it tags. Okay, so I will go to my AWS account and let's go to the Lambda resource, that is basically Lambda, and then yes, it's Amazon Lambda. So I'm going to go to the Lambda resource like this, and so currently I'm using so I will be using the Oregon region here. So in this region I have created a Lambda called Universal Tagging Lambda, and this is currently using Python 3.11, and it's fully configured. So if I go to the code here, I'm going to copy paste the code that we have written here, and we try to invoke that resources and try to see that whether it tags as well. All right. So let me deploy this resource. Basically, let me deploy this Lambda. So while it deploying, what I do is I'm going to go to the VPC resource and try to show you that currently it does not has a tag called the tag called lab. So if you go to the VPCs in Oregon region and we go to the VPC like this, right? So and in this one we don't see a tag called so in this Lambda we are tagging a resource called, we are actually adding a tag called lab key and value equal to demo, which is not there here. So now what I do is I'm going to run this Lambda in front of you, and we see that it is getting replicated. All right, so let me try to run this the Lambda right away here. So what do I do is so in this the design solution I have shown you as a schedule. You can schedule it and it will keep on running periodically. But for this demo purpose, I am just invoking from here by using the test. The test basically. Yeah? So I'm going to go on a test and let's create a demo event. Let it be hello world, and let me save it. So we created a demo event here. So I will go to that demo event and try to select that and click on a test basically. So once I click on a test, if you see here, currently it is taking 3 seconds, 4 seconds ago, right? So basically you can track the the things happening here. So what you will do is so if you see here, looks like there is something the error has thrown. What I do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to go on a pause and try to fix it and come back. Okay, so after checking this particular error, right, so here you see that error in tag resource by region function, this one, and object has no tag resource basically. So there was a syntactical error. If I go to this line number here, so we are using the tag client. So this tag client has the API called tag resources, that you can find it here. If you go to the Bodo 3 the documents of AWS, and you can go to the here, so there is an option called tag resources. If you go here, you see that client tag resources, that's where it was having a mistake, which I corrected, and then I deployed to this particular Lambda. Now we are good to execute it. So let me try to test it again. So as you see here, currently it is running in 5 seconds. Remember that as soon as I execute for a particular iteration, it will fetch only 1000 resources. Basically, this is a limitation that is set by AWS, not by me. In the sense, the API can fetch you only 1000 resources in one shot. And in AWS document, they are telling you that try to customize the query which can get you the targeted resource which is less than 1000 only, which looks to be fair for a particular account. Yeah. Alright, so as you see here, this is purely a live demo here, and currently we see that it has taken 37 seconds ago. So basically, remember that this is a single Lambda performing for all the regions. Alright, so if you see here, looks like it has done the job. So in this output, if you see that we have an output called, so that is 4 tolu. What is this 4 tolu? Basically, if I go to this Lambda logic, in the Lambda logic, we are actually sending the error. We are actually printing total error resources and total error resource, the length of the total error resources. Okay, so here not tagged, basically not tagged list is actually a total error resources, right? That is nothing but ARNs on which you cannot invoke a tag resources APIs, and that is the list it is showing here. So in the sense, out of 1000 we got ARNs which are not taggable, and the count is 4 tolu. In the sense, we are almost tagged 588. So we tagged 588 resources in just basically a couple of seconds, or basically only yeah, just in a 10 or 14 seconds. Yeah, now we can try to evaluate just by checking the resources. Okay, let me go to the, as I showed you earlier, that is our VPC was not tagged. Now if I refresh it and try to see, I'm expecting that it should be tagged. Let's go to this one. Here you go, right? So we have our VPC resource got tagged. I didn't do anything, but it got tagged. Okay, remember that it is supposed to tag all the regions. We can actually explore and try to see that whether that is happening. You go to the public, you go to the any subnet. So here it is taggable resource, so it is working. Now you go to the views as well. So if you go to the views and click on the views as well, so views is also a AWS resource, right? So it is basically should be taggable. And if you refresh it here, so you should be able to see the tags here as well. So here you go, right? So we got a tag something like this. Now if I can switch to the another region, so let me take you to the the North Virginia region, for example, say, and we try to see whether it has tagged the resources present underneath the region or not. So looks like I have cleaned up, but let me try to see, try to go to another region. So that is, for example, Mumbai. I will go to the Mumbai region and try to see if I have tagged the resources. So here, fortunately, I have the resources in VPC. And if I go to the tag, so here I got the VPC resource being tagged. Similarly, you can explore the other resources of VPC that like subnet. So subnet has the tags. If I go to the route table and click on the route table, and route table supports the tags, so it has the tags. Now you go to the the internet gateway, so you go to here and go to the tag. So basically, it supports the tag, right? So indeed, so here what do I showed here is basically, so this is the custom solution which I have built here, and it is actually enabling you to maintain the sanity of tagging at the AWS resources in your infrastructure across the accounts, across the regions of your account. Alright, so with that note, I have shown you the things need to be shown in this video. Finally, I can't request please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. With that note, thank you, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.